families moved into this area, one of which was the Bender family. They owned 160 acres that faced the Osage Trail. The first of the family who arrived were the men, John Bender Sr., who was about 60 years old, John Bender Jr., who was 25, and about a year later, in 1871, the women arrived, Elvira Bender, who was 55, and then Kate, who was 23 years old. Once the family was all settled into their new home, they decided to turn the front half of their cabin into a general store slash kitchen area. It was separated by a canvas curtain, so the bedroom area and the kitchen area were separated by the canvas curtain. So basically it was an inn. It was a little mini inn where travelers could get some food and rest, but they were not the normal innkeepers that you would expect, and this would soon come to light. Although the community they settled into were full of spiritualists, and I mean that seriously, like every single family, all 5 of those families were made up of spiritualists. Their family immediately got a rap for being on the odd side. Kate was a hardcore spiritualist who claimed to be able to cure illnesses and be able to speak to the dead, which honestly people really loved about her. Like, they were into it, girl. Like, I mean, they were all made up of spiritualists, so I mean, it wasn't really out of place. But what people did not like about her and what they thought was weird about her was that she really believed in free love, and she would hold sermons on it, and that was just too unorthodox for them. They didn't like it. As for Elvira, Miss Girl, was called a she-devil, because she was apparently so unfriendly that they gave her this nickname. Like, I don't know what she was doing that made them think she was so unfriendly to be given this nickname, but like, damn, girl. As for John Jr., he had this habit of aimlessly laughing at things. He would just randomly start laughing at nothing, which led to people calling him a half-wit because they just really didn't think that he was all there. The bloodshed began in May of 1871 when a man was found with his throat sliced and his skull crushed in Drum Creek near the Bender's property. I couldn't find anything saying that they investigated the Benders for this, even though it was by their property. So nothing really came of that. And then in February of 1872, 2 other men were found with the exact same injuries, and word started to spread that people were disappearing and ending up dead off of Osage Trail. So travelers started avoiding it altogether, or that area of the trail anyway. Vigilantes were trying to get to the bottom of this and were arresting and questioning just like a bunch of random men along the trail, and no luck. Then a man by the name of George Newton Longcore went missing. After the death of his wife, he and his 18-month-old daughter, Mary Ann, were relocating from Independence, Kansas to Iowa. So they bought some horses and a wagon from a Dr. William Henry York, but unfortunately they never made it to their destination. Dr. York was eventually notified that the wagon and horses he sold Longcore were found abandoned near Fort Scott, Kansas. Obviously, this concerned him greatly because it wasn't like it was just George on his own. It was also his was like, why would they leave this? There was obviously some foul play here. They wouldn't just abandon their wagon, right? And the horses too. So he decided to go after them. In 1873, he followed their exact route, I don't know, and asked all of the homesteaders along the trail if they had seen them, but to no avail. And eventually he made his way to Fort Scott, where he confirmed that the horses and wagon were the ones he sold to Longcore, as well as the belongings found within it. Since he had no luck in his search, he decided to just head back home because there wasn't really anything else that he could do. But he would make the exact same mistake that many travelers did, and that was deciding to take a rest at the Bender Inn. In a way, this was kind of good for the case. Obviously not for Dr. York, but just for like finding out what the hell was going on, because Dr. York actually came from a pretty prominent family. He had two brothers, one of which was Alexander. Why did I say it like that? Alexander M. York, who was a member of the Kansas Senate, and then Colonel Ed York, who, when he found out about his brother's disappearance, he immediately arranged a search party of 75 men, and they tracked him all the way to Bender Inn. And initially, when meeting the Benders, there was no proof of any foul play, so, and obviously the Benders denied having seen anything, having seen Dr. York at all, so there was nothing really for him to go on. It's not like he could arrest them off of intuition alone, or the fact that he thought his brother had been there. So they left, but he would eventually come back about a month later with armed men, after hearing quite the story from a woman who claimed to have fled the inn after being threatened by Elvira with knives and pistols. The she-devil herself was out there threatening people, okay? The colonel then relayed this accusation to Elvira herself, but I forgot to mention this earlier, but the family were thought to be German immigrants, so they could speak English, but they had German accents, obviously, since it wasn't their first language. And when she was faced with this accusation, she started pretending like she didn't know English. She was like, I don't know what you're saying. And then she started accusing that woman of having cursed her coffee. And then the colonel just accused her again, and it made Elvira super pissed, and she started yelling at them and trying to kick them out in fluent English. She was speaking to them in fluent English, was yelling at them. So obviously she was lying, but this is where Kate decided to step in and kind of diffuse things a bit, and she told the colonel, relax, dude. I can help you with your search because you know who I am. I'm a psychic and I can speak to the dead. So if you come back next Friday with less of your men, then I will lead you to your brother's grave. And he was like, yeah, sounds good. I'll do that. But sometime in between this conversation and the next Friday, the local township held a meeting because people kept hearing about these disappearances and were blaming the towns around Osage. So to address the issue, they agreed that they would obtain search warrants for every property between Big Hill Creek and Drum Creek. Colonel York, John Bender Sr., and John Jr. were all in attendance, so what happened next? Obviously the Benders fled. No one really noticed until a few days later when a neighbor, Billy Joel, realized, Billy Joel, this is suspicious. So he reported it to Leroy Dick, who was the town officer, and he called for a search party. Upon searching, they discovered a trap door that absolutely reeked, and beyond this door was an empty room, or like hole. It wasn't really a proper room, and there was so much blood that had been spilled in that room that it had seeped through the stone floor into the dirt below, and the blood was like clotting in the dirt, which is why it smelled so bad. But there were no bodies. So they continued the search on the property, and it was in Elvira and Kate's vegetable garden that they discovered Dr. York buried in a shallow grave. And by the next day, the search party had recovered 10 full bodies as well as other dismembered parts that couldn't be identified. They were all killed with the same MO, hit in the head before having their throats slit, all except baby Marianne. It's believed that she was buried alive, and it also said that they were indecently mutilated, which is, I assume, the Victorian way of saying, like, genital trauma. Based on what some survivors of the Bender Inn said, it is believed that their victims were given the seat of honor, which backed the canvas curtain. And while they were sitting there, one of the women would distract them by speaking to them or flirting with them, you know. And one of the men, most likely John Bender Sr., would sneak up behind them, behind the canvas curtain, and smash them on the head. Before, one of the women would come and slit their throat to make sure that they were dead, and then they would rifle the body for any valuables before dropping them through the trapdoor. Further searches of the property led to some confusing things. They questioned the neighbors, and from what they heard, they came to the conclusion that John Jr. and Kate were not brother and sister as previously believed, that they were actually lovers, and there isn't any definitive proof of the family's relationships to each other. So, like, there's no proof of what actually was going on there. If they were husband and wife, if they were brother and sister, or if they were just, like, not involved at all in that way. They also, when looking through the property, found a Bible that belonged to John Jr., but the name in there was not John Bender. It was John, I'm just gonna put it on the screen because I can't pronounce that at all. So not Bender. In fact, none of these people were thought to have actually been named Bender. Elvira was born Almira Mark and had multiple children. Don't know where they went. And apparently she also had multiple husbands, which some people say died of head injuries before she took the Bender alias. So it seems that she took the name first. No one knows why Elvira decided on taking an alias or why the rest of the family followed suit. But yeah, I don't know. Her fifth child was Kate, who was born Eliza Griffith, and John Sr. was born John Flickinger. After all of this was uncovered, rewards were offered for anyone who apprehended the family, and detectives tracked them to Thayer. The Benders had abandoned their horses and wagon 12 miles north of the inn. From here on out, it's not known what is actually factual, but it is believed that John Jr. and Kate ran off to an outlaw colony bordering Texas and New Mexico is rumored that they fled to St. Louis, Missouri. And in 1884, an elderly man in Idaho was arrested for murdering a man with a hammer, which was the same method that was used with the Bender victims, and the investigators thought he matched the description of John Bender Sr., so they contacted Kansas enforcement. But in the meantime, he decided to try and escape by cutting off his own foot, like saw style, but it only ended in him bleeding out and his body decomposed before it could be identified and confirmed to be John Bender Sr., so we don't know if that was actually him, but I feel like him trying to escape and cut off his own foot is confirmation enough, because why would he do that if it wasn't him, you know? Like, why would he be so concerned about them trying to come identify him, you know? In 1889, a mother named Elmira and daughter named Sarah Elizabeth were arrested for larceny in Michigan, which, let me remind you that Elmira was Elvira's birth given name and Kate's birth given name was Eliza, so kinda similar. But when they were brought to Kansas for identification, the results were inconsistent, so they were released back to Michigan. So they kind of escaped with no consequences, no justice was served, but I feel like those were them, right? But yeah, that's it for this case. Let me know what you guys think happened to them. Like, do you think that was them? My cat is going crazy. She's playing with the laces of my shoes.